The following program is sponsored by The Greek, Ely's Radio Shack dealer at 570 Altman in downtown Ely, and brought to you as public service by Georgetown Media in Ely, Nevada. White Pine County Board of Equalization meeting, February 24th, 2023.
Mr. Chair. When your case is called, you'll be brought up and you'll be given plenty of opportunity. I'll actually go over the procedure of how we're going to go through the case. Public comment should be, there's no limitation on the public comment here as far as topics, but you are given an opportunity to make your case when we call your case. Okay.
There'll be a public comment also at the end of the meeting today. Also, we have possibly some attending via Zoom today. If there anybody from Zoom audience that would like to make a comment at this time, go right ahead. Any public comment at all from you? I see none. All right.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a statement before we start. Public comment.
Could you approach the microphones, please?
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I have a major concern that I may not be given a fair hearing. Jim Allworth has discriminated against me and my family for years. As city clerk, he selectively enforced ordinances under color of law. He conducted a private business while he was in office, and he failed to obtain permits and paid the proper fees as others did. As a city employee, he was double dipping on taxpayers' time and was not in compliance with city personnel policy. To date, as a city councilman, he continues to selectively enforce city codes. I and my family are victims. I don't like that. He needs to remove himself from the hearing of my concerns. Mr. Chairman, you also are tainted. Over the years, as I brought different issues before you on city boards, you failed to do your due diligence and investigate the complaints. Nothing's been done to date. Some of my properties have been upgraded, water, sewer services, as well as new electrical services. Yet I can't use the property as others do all around me. Now the county has basically given away land for so-called affordable housing that is in the $400,000 range. The county, the city, and especially the county assessor have no business competing against the private sector. State NRS clearly states that issue. Thank you.
Any more public comment at this time? All right. District Attorney James Beecher has agreed to conduct and to explain the legal considerations that we'll be talking about today in our appeals. And I'd like to turn that time over to him at this time for agenda items D, E, and F.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a preparatory matter, I would just ask that we go around and everybody identify themselves just for the record. And we'll start with the county assessor Burden. We'll go around, we'll identify ourselves, and then if we can have the audience also identify themselves so we know for the record who's all here.
Burton Hilton, White Pine County Assessor.
Melanie Cato, Chief Deputy.
Jim Allworth, Board Member.
Art Olson, Board Member.
Edwin Shepchick, Board Member.
James Beecher, District Attorney.
Nicole Baldwin, ex officio clerk to the Board of Equalization.
And then if we could start in the audience with, I believe it's Mr. Fitzgerald.
John Fitzgerald, veteransinitiatives.org.
George.
George Chachis.
Victoria Polly.
Tim Pauling.
Thank you. And it looks like on Zoom we have three people, Heidi's here, Stephanie Bacchus, and Andy Heiser. All right, so just to explain my role is I'm the attorney for the board to make sure that we're following the meeting law, to answer any questions that they have on the law. I don't represent the assessor. I don't represent anybody in the appeals. I may ask questions about certain evidence. My reasoning for that is as we proceed in these cases, I want to be able to give the board an idea of the relevance or a value of different evidence presented. So if I have questions, at the board's discretion, I may jump in and ask some questions. But again, this is for the benefit of the board, not for the benefit of either the assessor or any of the appellants or petitioners. The procedure we're gonna take today is we're gonna ask for if there's any motions or preliminary matters of consideration, including withdrawals, and that'll be on D, so I'll ask for that in a second. After that, we're going to discuss the consolidation of hearings. I'm gonna get the opinions of the petitioners and the assessor as far as whether we should consolidate the different properties into hearings or if there's different issues on the different properties, just for the sake of efficiency. Once we do that, we'll call up individual cases. The petitioner has the burden of proof by preponderance of the evidence. What preponderance of the evidence means, it means by the weight of the evidence. When you look at all the evidence weighs more heavily in your favor. If it's 50-50, then the petitioner has not met the burden of preponderance. It has to be, it's colloquially known as, 50% plus one is the standard, even though legally speaking, there is no number valuation given into it. But it's basically, you have to show that your case is more likely to be true than the assessor's case. So because of that, you get to go first. I'm talking about the petitioners, will go first, make your case. The assessor will then respond with the assessor's evidence and the assessor's argument, and then the petitioner will also have the opportunity to have a rebuttal evidence of what the assessor presented. At the discretion of the board, if there's something in the rebuttal that the assessor feels like he needs to address, he may ask for what we call a sur-rebuttal, which is a rebuttal to the rebuttal. That's the discretion of the board to allow that or not. And basically you go back and forth until the board has heard enough and doesn't see further discussion being valuable. At that time, we'll close the evidentiary portion. Then the board has a couple of options. The board can make findings that the petitioner did in fact meet its burden and revalue the property. The board can find that the petitioner did not meet its burden and leave the property valued as is. Or the board can take it under advisement if they want to do more research and come back with an opinion later. Those are the options that the board has, and we can discuss that when we get there. Then we move on to the next case, and so on and so forth, until we get to the end of the agenda, and of course we'll have public comment at the end as well, if anybody wants to make that. So at this point, are there any questions on the procedure that we're going to use going forward? And one step after the board is obviously if you disagree with the board's decision, you always have the opportunity to appeal to the State Board of Equalization. Okay, and seeing no questions on that.
Mr. Attorney?
Yes.
Last year, when we went through this process, I understood it, very good presentation, but the one person on here, Mr. Chachas, he went to the State Board, appealed it to the state level. How do we find out how that turned out?
So, yeah, last year's appeal was, the decision of the board was affirmed by the state. What we could do in the future, I attended virtually, the assessor attended in person. And so I knew what happened that day. What we could do in the future, if at the request of the board, is send out an email to the board letting them know what happened, if anything, at the appeals level. But that's something I hadn't even thought of. So that's
Because, the one thing I'm concerned about, give him a fair shake, but Mr. Chachas didn't even go over to Carson City. He didn't go in front of the board.
That's correct.
So we the taxpayers had to pay for our staff, the county staff, to go over there and present their case. And in my opinion, are we gonna do the same thing here, go through this whole process for a couple hours, and however we decide, but we challenge one of them, I'm gonna take it to the state board. So here we go again, the whole process again, which is a waste of taxpayers' dollars. For some individual that talks about taxpayers' dollars all the time, he's wasting a bunch of it. So that's my concern of going through this process, just to, here we go again, dog chasing his tail.
I appreciate that, and I definitely understand your concerns. I can talk about that more in depth
Okay.
once we call Mr. Chachas's case.
Right.
There is some things that, that I have, depending on what's presented today. I think we need to see what's presented, and I will express opinions as necessary when it comes to that, and we can discuss that once that comes up.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I want to get to we'll open item D, withdrawals. Is there any withdrawals of the petitions filed by petitioners? And seeing none, along with that, are there any motions or preliminary matters for consideration that the petitioners want heard prior to starting? Okay, I think we'll move on to the consolidation. This is E, consolidation of hearings, discussion for possible action, approval to consolidate hearings listed on the agenda. Consolidation to be considered when appeals assert the same or similar questions of fact or law. So I'd first like to, so Mr. John Fitzgerald has one appeal and one property, so I don't think we need to address that in terms of consolidation. But if I can have the Pollys approach the microphone, and maybe we can discuss the two appeals that they have and whether it would be appropriate to consolidate, or are there different facts in the different appeals that you want to address independently. And again, this is not on the merits, this is just the issue of consolidation.
So our view on sharing influence property, which is basically in my wife's name right now because my mother-in-law is aging.
So that's for identification, I don't mean to interrupt, I just want to make sure we're clear. That's the 23.03 or -03 property?
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure we're clear what we're talking about. Okay.
We feel that she has been singled out, much like we have been, only because that my wife's name is on her property.
Okay, and then what is the issue, is that the same or similar issue to 23-02?
Aurora's looking over tax, yes, if that's what you want to consider the same issue.
Okay. But are there different facts with the different properties?
Mrs. Henthorn is personal property tax has been assessed to her property. A 77-year-old woman with items on her property that's been there for as long as she's owned it, and in other places. We have found many properties around the same area, and we've submitted those that are not taxed the same.
Okay, so it sounds like that, it sounds like those are, the two properties have two different kind of issues. Like, there's different facts supporting
Okay.
the objection, am I correct in that?
Yes.
Okay, so then I would recommend, does the assessor have an opinion?
I agree, I think they're two separate cases
Okay.
on it, and I don't think they're appropriate to put together.
Okay, so then my recommendation for the board, and it's the board's discretion, the board will make its motion once we talk about everything. But my recommendation to the board would be not consolidate the two poly properties. Then I'd like to address Mr. Chachas, which looks like he stepped out. Does anybody know where he went?
I'm sorry, no.
Okay, well then I'll turn to this assessor first. Do you have an opinion as
I
to?
feel that all of the Chachas cases should be consolidated. They have the same factual basis that he's appealing under.
Okay, and and it looks like he presented one packet of evidence for one, as if it was one appeal, is that right?
Yeah.
So, and he listed, just for the record, he listed all the parcel numbers on the one packet of evidence. Mr. Chachas, if you want to come forward and talk specifically about the issue of consolidation, it's the recommendation of the assessor that we hear all the appeals at once. Do you have an opinion on this?
No, I don't have a problem with that. The basic argument or request is all my properties be valued as was valued on the land that was sold by the county.
And your arguments and your supporting documentation are the same for all the properties?
Exactly.
All right, that makes sense, I appreciate it, Mr. Chachas. So my recommendation to the board would be to make a motion to consolidate all appeals by George C. Chachas Trust into one hearing and to not consolidate any others.
Any objection?
No.
So be it.
All right, so now we'll move down to the actual, what this case is kind of about. So if we can have the assessor do that at this time.
Yes, and this is in your board agenda too. The subject property is located at 1 Warm Springs Road, off of Lackawanna Road. It's zoned 05, open range, which allows a large range of activities and mixed residential commercial use. We have it as property code is at 200 for the single family residence. It's 21.85 acres. The assessor's office has the property as an average/good classification for the new home. The parcel was created through a split in 2016. The property was reappraised for 23-24 tax year. No factor were used on the improvements or land. No adjustments were made to the land value. The parcel has no negative factors to consider. Marshall and Swift valuation and Nevada Rural Manual were used to appraise the improvements in accordance with the Nevada Administrative Code. This, which also, as I mentioned in the previous case, includes the Western Region and Lincoln County local multipliers as approved by the Nevada Tax Commission. The parcel's improvement sketch, plot mapping, imagery, assessment notice are attached in Exhibit 1. Mr. and Mrs. Polly submitted their appeal for this property for the upcoming 2023-24 tax year. They're appealing under NRS 361.357 that the full cash value market value of their property is less than the computed taxable value of the property that we computed in the assessor's office. They are appealing the improvement valuation and the secured personal property value for this property. At the time, they submitted no evidence with their appeal when they filed the appeal. Obviously, they submitted evidence yesterday or the day before. So that's all I have.
Okay. And thank you for that. And we'll turn to Mr. and Mrs. Polly. And the floor is yours for presentation of evidence, explanation of evidence that you submitted, and any additional evidence or explanation that you wish the board to hear today.
All right, I'd like to start by reading the prepared statement that I sat down and got also. We are here today to contest the estimation of assessed value by the White Pine County Assessor Burton Hilton on the manufactured home located at 1 Warm Springs Road, and also a personal property tax assigned to my mother-in-law, Sharon Kim, located on State Route 490.
Right now, we're only, just for clarification, we're only on the O2 case.
You want me to read this again on that one?
No, it's, you know, if you can't, if it would be more convenient for you to address them together, we can consolidate. If you would rather address them together.
We'll bounce them. Okay, sorry, I'll admit that. I feel through extreme prejudice of the assessor Burton Hilton and his erroneous trumped up values of our home and Sharon's personal property is discrimination against us for past differences. We are currently researching state laws to see how many have been superseded for him to make his point. Here are some untruths that Mr. Hilton's deposition that is in your packet there before you today. One of them, number one, Mr. Hilton was asked to make an appointment when the owners were home. 2, we were not advised about said disclosures, as he stated in his deposition. Number 3, we did not agree any disclosures, too many disclosures. Number 4, I, myself, did not hang up on Mr. Hilton. His inability to work with the public to accommodate their situation makes a person wonder if he's even suitable for public office. It is clear here today that the bully has turned into the bully, abusing his authority to place financial difficulties on citizens that will be harmed or interrupt their ways of life. So with that being said, I do have a conclusion that I will read in our rebuttal. We would like to show in our packet that was handed in several new manufactured homes that have more square footage than we have, that are finished homes. We're living in an unfinished home. Our home does not even have HVAC in it currently. It is a cabin built in Pennsylvania by Amish people, and obviously we have electricity installed. We have wood heat in our home and electric heat that we use in space heaters around to keep it warm. The upstairs, which is overestimated quantities, have been re-estimated quantities. They're not the same size as the main floor of 1,500 plus square feet. The attic space is only 920 plus square feet. The basement is less square feet because they have 14-inch walls where they have big block forming. There are a few petitions that are in the basement that we have put in per code to our local building inspector. And he understands that we're eventually going to get HVAC, and this is to carry the ductwork and stuff down there for that. Not sure if it's going to happen this year, but they have started.
So if you look at our tax proposal, it is a 200 land use, and if you look at the 3 examples that I found online, they are, I believe, a 220 for manufactured home. And that is in fact what our home is. It is in the manufactured home. In your packet, you'll see that we have our manufactured stickers from the state that are in our home. One is under the kitchen sink, one is in the bathroom on the north side of the home. So our home was craned onto the basement, is on the stick structure. I don't know if that changes his, Mr. Hilton's work for assessing or a different assessment value. But in the 3 examples we have, there's one that has considerably amount of more floor space than we do. We have 1560, that one had 1900 and something. So our building is assessed at $829,000. And these other manufactured homes that you find are assessed at $226 for building. It's just, I don't know, I'm not versed in the law, I didn't bother to take time because I got other things to worry about also. But to me, it's just, I don't know if it was assumed that this was a stick-built home.
But we challenge the board to find a manufactured home in White Pine County that's worth $829,000.
Did you allow the assessor access to the building to observe those stickers?
Okay, so what we did is, you'll find in your packet, there are my recording of phone conversation. I jotted down our conversation on a piece of paper, and I later transcribed it to that so my wife could print it up for that. You will find that in there, and that is the true and actual conversation between Mr. Hilton and myself. We were going out of town on the day that he was called, and he says, I will be there late morning. You can read it for yourself. And I asked him if we could set something up for next week, because he won't be home and the gate will be locked. He said he would walk in, and I asked him, please don't, make an appointment, and we will escort you up there next week when we are home.
Did you follow up and give him access in the future?
He told me that he would not make an appointment with me. He said he was assessor for 8 years of White Pine County, and he makes appointments with no one. End of story. After the phone call was finished, my wife asked, well, who wants to make an appointment? And I told her, Burton Hilton. I offered that to him, but he hung up on me, so roll up your sleeves, we're headed for the fight.
Is there any questions from the board? If there are no questions, then we'll turn this over to the assessor, and he will give his response.
Thank you. So, as noted in your, well, first I want to address the way this process works is I'm essentially the defendant, you guys are the prosecutor, and because no evidence was presented with the appeal, I'm basically having to give you all this information, and then they're rebutting to me. This should be an opposite deal here. They should be presenting their information that I get to rebut to, and that did not occur. And then it feels like it was definitely done with bad faith to be submitting evidence 2 days before the hearing. Bad faith to our office, but also bad faith to the board. So the first issue is secured personal property, which they haven't mentioned anything in their evidence. They did not return the declaration as prescribed by law, so I made an estimate on that. They appealed it, but there was nothing in here disputing any of the valuation or providing any documentation that my estimate was incorrect. On the property, I'm not sure, I really don't know where the 800 came from. I have it at 710,000 for the house. But the bigger issue is we don't make appointments. No assessor in the entire state of Nevada makes appointments to go into property. We're agents of White Pine County and of the state of Nevada doing our official business. We can go into a property for our official purpose whenever we are out doing our job. There's no way to schedule appointments. We could go to 12 properties in a day or 60. I can't tell you how long a property is gonna take. This isn't even feasible. You'd have to triple the staffs of every assessor's office in the entire state of Nevada. And that's why I did say, if he told me that the gate was locked, I'll walk in, and he told me, no, I'm not allowed on the property. I categorically take issue with the very first page of their information that states that my staff in April flew by the office. They stopped and talked to Mrs. Polly, who called her husband. So I have statements from both of my staff talking about that. They didn't even know where the house was because there was just a foundation at that point. It's a huge parcel on a mountain. So that, I take it, you know, whatever on his conversation with, I don't agree with what he put for the conversation between Mr. Pauly and I. That's fine, I'm not, but I take a great exception about what was said about my staff. When I was denied access and told not to go into the property and that I had to schedule, I informed Mr. Pauly that I will be making an estimate according to state law. That if I'm not allowed onto a property, and that's included in your information, it's under NRS 361.345, that I have to make an estimate. If I can't get on there, because everything's taxable, I've got to try to make things fair and equitable for everybody. Now, if I can't get on a property, I don't know if I have a measurement wrong or not. I might, you know, in their information, they made some corrections on some of the measurements. I may have something incorrect. I have to make an estimate off of the information I have. So, and that's what I did. Their home, per the building department and per other property we've had in the county, is considered a modular home, which is assessed as a stick-built house, not considered a manufactured housing, even though it has the plates. Manufactured housing, you have a dealer's report of sale, you have a title with Nevada Manufactured Housing Division. You know, the evidence of example properties, I'm not even sure what I'm supposed to be comparing. Converted manufactured home, we use a land code of 220 on that. Land code just means something does, it doesn't change how, like it's just an identifier. If I type in 220, it means I can find all the converted mobile homes. If I type in a 236, that means a manufactured home where the taxes are secured to the property. It doesn't change anything on how we assess. It's just an identifier within assessors' offices. So in my exhibit 1, you'll see all the improvements that we have. There's numerous buildings, structures on the property. We have pictures, everything that we can see. I took the pictures from the highway. One of the foundation was when my staff was up there, and Mr. Pauly told them he didn't know why the fuck they were there, and he didn't want them on his property. And they did not feel comfortable, so they left, which I do not blame them. In Exhibit 2 is the estimates on the personal property.